I mean, it was cool at one.
No.
I picked Xena because I think she asked genuine questions and wasn't trying to win.
Hey, well, hello again.
Hi there.
My claim is Jordan Peterson's framework for understanding Christianity is probably not the one that the Bible intended us to use. In regards to the way that you interpret the Bible, I don't see, you have said in some circumstances that there's not a way to kind of say whether or not ontologically the historical claims made by the Bible are true. Like, for example, the story of Cain and Abel. You've said that this story is like a meta-truth in the sense that it exists all throughout time, culturally. And the way that you define meta-truth, I don't see a distinction between that and like a metaphor, right? But and you also said that you cannot say whether this story was true. You can say that it exists eternally, metaphorically, but you can't say that it's true. And
Hello and welcome. Feel free to join the Discord. Feel free to drop questions, comments in the chat. Right now I'm just watching parts of this Jordan Peterson video that I didn't really fully finish by myself, so feel free to comment on that. I guess my general sense is I think it was just titled wrong. And actually, look, Jubilee changed the title. Because I know for a fact this used to be called One Christian versus 20 Atheists. But it became somewhat obvious during the thing that Jordan Peterson isn't exactly a Christian in the way you would think about it. So maybe he's leaning, I want to be fair to his spiritual journey, maybe he's leaning towards Christianity, maybe he agrees with Christianity, maybe he even goes to church and, is a Christian, but he doesn't profess Christ, the name of Christ before people. So I think it's hard to truly call him a Christian. When asked in this video, he says he doesn't defend Christ. He doesn't support Christ when he's asked directly. So I don't think he's a Christian per se, at least not yet. I pray for his journey and for his conversion and for his salvation. So it's actually interesting that they updated the title. That was proper. It should not have been called One Christian versus 20 Atheists. That was never really what it was.
if you can't say that there are historical facts being said in the Bible as stories that weren't really said with much ambiguity, how can we say that we can understand the Bible in the way that it's meant to be interpreted? Like, if you cannot make any claims about these stories, right? You don't know whether they're true or false. How do you know that your interpretation is the correct way?
Mm-hmm. See, that's why I picked you. You ask intelligent questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. What do they say? By their fruits you'll know them.
Okay.
Right. Well, so one of the things I look at is the impact of what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I know a lot of evangelical Christians, a lot of Catholics, a lot of Orthodox Christians, a lot of people from other faiths. And they've told me, like many of them, that they found my interpretations very helpful and that it deepened their faith. And so that's interesting because I wouldn't have necessarily expected that to be the case. And I've also talked to thousands of people who've told me that they came to understand the foundational stories of their culture better as a consequence of listening to me, and that they did everything they could to sort out their lives and that it worked. That's many different pieces of evidence that all converge on something like the practical and conceptual utility of my approach. Now, Is it the same? There is a lot of approaches to biblical interpretation historically, and what I'm doing is possibly less new than you think.
Yeah, I want to make a claim on whether this evidence is enough, right, to substantiate whether or not your interpretation is going to, be more plausible, right, be the most plausible. Because in regards to...
So basically what Jordan, she asked him, how do you know your interpretation is correct of the Old Testament? And, well, that's usually what he talks about, but the Bible in general, Christianity in general. And Jordan Peterson says, essentially, I don't know that it's correct, or at least this is a good question, but I take the testimony of Christians who approach me and say, thank you for doing this work. And it has deepened my understanding of my faith or the religion or something like that. So he sort of takes it on anecdotal, testimonial evidence that what he's doing is helpful, is good. I personally, anecdotally, also think his approach is helpful. I think the Bible can be unpacked and interpreted in so many ways. So many ways. It's probably infinite how much you can get out of the Bible. And so to add the psychological/sociological lens onto it, I feel like there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like that's great. I feel like it just adds one more way for us to understand this holy text. But to answer the question, truly, he doesn't, because he's not centered in tradition. He's doing his own thing. He's doing the psychological and the sociological analysis, which is, I mean, strictly speaking, not the correct interpretation, because the correct interpretation is full-bodied. The correct interpretation is the person of Christ. That's the only interpretation. The only full one is the actual life, death, and resurrection of Christ and his teaching. So, again, it's good that they changed the title. I will also add my support, my advocacy of the Jordan Peterson approach to understanding the Bible. And I will laud this question for exposing pretty much the flaw of his argument, which is that he's not a Christian. Jordan Peterson is such a mumbo jumbo, Lamau. What is you? What is belief? What is God? What do? What do? Exactly. I'm not sure I'm totally in support of that. The sort of like, that, I don't know, taking apart every single word. I'm not sure if I totally appreciate that. I just like his approach to analyzing the Bible, even if it's not the full-bodied one, even if it's not the fully correct one. It adds something to the conversation, which is interesting. For NDVN 29. Also, I'd like to see you get into the ring with Jordan. Yeah, he should take an L when he has to. I think he did dirty. I don't know if you know about this debate, or whatever, this video. But people were basically like, "You're not Christian," and he's like, "No, I'm not." But everyone thought they were here to debate one Christian versus 20 atheists. But he literally says he's not Christian. So he sort of took a big L on that, on the way the video was set up. But let's see how.
Good question.
Yeah, right.
You bet.
So in regards to how we interpret the Bible and how we see the Bible, something can add value to someone's life. An interpretation can add value to someone's life.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, it might be the case that he hasn't actually found the faith yet. He's obviously lives in the mental, intellectual world so much, and even in the political world a little bit. And it's possible he just hasn't signed his heart over to Jesus. So that would make it hard. That's what would make it difficult to admit he has faith. But I think he should just do it. I mean, I think he's right on the border. And when he does, it'll be right. He just won't be able to defend the later part of the arguments. Yeah, he can. I mean, also because he's not a Christian, the questions he asked, or the claims he makes, are kind of not relevant so much. I mean, they're interesting. This should have been called one ex-atheist versus 20 atheists. That would have made it a lot more clear. So claim one is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. I think that's totally true, but it says nothing about God. Morality and purpose can't be found within science. Again, totally true. Says nothing about Christianity, right? Everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it. And that is true. Again, only tangentially relates to Christianity. If you deride Christianity all day, why not just admit you're a Christian? Because he might not be one. He might deride it from a from like the intellectual perspective, but not in his heart. You know what I mean? Which is a funny way of phrasing that. Okay, atheists accept Christian morality but deny the religion's foundational stories. I mean, that's at least a vaguely Christian claim. And yeah, then we get to this lady.
Interpretation can connect you to your conception of what your faith is. But if it's the quote-unquote interpretation that God does not intend, that can lead to a plethora.
That's certainly the case.
you
That's
know,
why the medieval Christians were so concerned about heresy.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they felt, and that's why the Catholics objected so much to the Protestant Reformation, because
Doesn't that make him atheist too? Not quite. I think it would make him agnostic at worst. Because he clearly, well, I mean, it depends on how he's really seeing this. If he actually thinks God is, if his full definition of God is just what you worship, then he certainly could still be an atheist. But if he believes, although he never talks about it, although actually his claim that morality can't be found in science is an anti-atheist claim because it has to be found somewhere, right? I mean, he believes in morality and purpose. So he believes in a metaphysic. I'm not sure if he grounds those things. Like, I don't know if he's encountered the transcendental arguments. I'm sure he has. So I would doubt that he's an atheist. Probably something more like an agnostic or like, honestly, just like a fledgling Christian, just like hasn't bought in yet, hasn't given his heart away. I think that's what I would guess. But I who am I to psychologize? And like, I have no idea what's happening in his spirit. I have no idea what's happening in his heart. It could be that he is just the most devout lover of Christ and has totally signed his will away. But for some reason, it's not right for him to say that yet, or something like that. Who knows? I can't judge. I don't really know.
because they believed that the fractionation of Christianity would result in an indefinite fractionation, right? Well, and that's exactly what's happened.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely a problem. I think one of the foundational principles, for example, there's a foundational principle in the Old Testament of hospitality, right? So what you want to do if you set up your local environment properly is to make it welcoming to people voluntarily. And so one of the ways you could judge the validity of the interpretation of a classic story is whether or not that interpretation might be regarded by someone as welcoming. Does that represent something you'd actually like to have if you were acting in your own interest in the long run?
Right, and we can talk about that. Like do
protect you from fear might be another one.
Exactly. So we can talk about like how these interpretations of the Bible, like if they kind of resonate with us. And I think that can in some case be some kind of like evidence, oh, this might be true, but I think we need to ask, is evidence damning, right? Is this evidence certain, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do want to look at, again, the consequences and our understanding of this interpretation once more. So we look at, again, the story of Cain and Abel, and we say, yeah, so I believe this is a meta-truth. I believe that this story is resonant throughout cultures. That is all true and dandy, and I'm sure that is some, in some way, the story was put in here for the reason, right? To tell us about, fights between brothers. But also, you can't say I do know or I don't know that this story is false or true in an ontological, historical sense, as a historical fact. Were there two people like that were specifically referenced?
Okay, I don't think that's knowable, but I'm not sure why it matters to you.
So the reason why it matters to me is because we need to know how we should interpret the things that the Bible says, and the things
many ways.
Right, but like if we interpret
sometimes poetry, sometimes history, sometimes fact,
but for
sometimes
example,
metaphor.
The reason why it's important, right, very important, is because, for example, we can talk about something like God says, I believe it's like 1 Corinthians 15:17, something about how belief in God specifically as someone who resurrected or as someone who died for our sins is important, right? But we have to look at, if we can interpret that as just like, you have to believe that God is a symbol of sacrifice. That is different from believing that there was an actual person named Jesus Christ who died on the cross for our sins.
True.
So if you believe one and not the other, that can be the difference between you going to hell and you going to heaven. So if we cannot make, like, we cannot say that we know whether or not certain historical facts in the Bible happen, like even as just like events, like, because the events matter, because again, God dying for our sins on the cross was an event. If we can't say that we know these things happened, these things did or didn't happen, this then leads us to kind of like the conundrum of how do we know what we are meant to believe, what the Bible intended for us to believe, and this can be very, very important to like our fate. Do you see what I'm saying?
I've got no disagreement with any of that. What sort of response do you want from that?
So
You pushed me beyond the limits of my knowledge.
Really?
Well, there's so many things you can't.
He's so intense. I love it. And it's great. I mean, it's right. She did push him beyond the limits of his knowledge. There is important distinction between, say, Cain and Abel, which I'll go ahead and state that my belief is that it's a real historical fact. That's just what strikes me. But I agree with Jordan Peterson that it's unknowable. It's fundamentally unknowable. Is the resurrection of Christ unknowable? No, I don't think so. I think we have good historical evidence. I think the inference to the best evidence is that, one, no historian disagrees that Christ existed, so we can throw that out there. No historian disagrees, and by no, of course, I'm excluding the fringe one or two people that are, say, crazy theories, right? But no historian believes that Christ wasn't crucified on the cross. I think the majority of historians will have to concede, even if they don't want to, that the tomb was actually empty. And so then we just go to the 3 or 4 hypotheses for how the tomb is empty. Either the disciples lied and it's a conspiracy. Some random grave robber stole the body, and then the disciples hallucinated all these post, resurrection appearances of Christ. Or I don't even know what the third that maybe there isn't a third. The third option is just that Christ actually rose from the dead, right, and left the tomb. So there's a discrepancy. There's a difference between the knowability of Cain and Abel being actual historical to real people and the knowability of Christ rising from the dead. We don't really have any evidence to speak of in terms of Cain and Abel. We have evidence to speak of in terms of Christ rising from the dead. And it seems clear that that historical fact, Jesus' actual life and death and resurrection, are what the faith hinges on. Not really Cain and Abel so much. Although, again, I'm inclined to believe that Cain and Abel were real. So the Bible is just exaggerated stories to guide people. That seems to be what Jordan Peterson is implying when he says that. In another interview with Dawkins, Richard Dawkins and Alex O'Connor, he does say that he's like not super, he's not very Christian about it. He doesn't declare it as good news. He doesn't declare it as, a triumphant victory, but he does say he thinks that Christ probably did actually historically rise from the dead. I don't believe the Bible is just exaggerated stories to guide people. I think they're true stories in the truest sense of the word. So not just historical, but also metaphysically true, metaphorically true. There's actually there's 4 senses that you can read the Bible, but we'll get into that later. But look, if you just took them as exaggerated stories to guide people, that would be better than not taking them at all. But I think they're a lot more than that. And I hope Jordan Peterson realizes that and figures out what's exactly true about them. Because it's more than just the story. It's more than just the symbol. Although the symbol is very important. Okay.
Can't know. I'm struggling. I know that the biblical stories are the foundation of Western culture. Mm-hmm. I know that the consequence of those stories has been the genesis of a society that is in the main freer and more abundant than any societies have ever been. I don't exactly understand the relationship between those stories and that outcome, but it's not nothing.
Right.
But I don't know the answer to the questions that you're asking. You know,
Exactly.
it's the case that forever when people have been interpreting religious stories, they wrestled with exactly the question that you just described. Mm-hmm. When is it fact? When is it poetry? When is it music? When is it metaphor? When is it ritual? When is it time-bound?
But what I'm saying is that your interpretation of the Bible, if you cannot tell us, again, if these historical events happened or not, that can be the deciding factor in if someone is like damned to hell for eternity or if they go to heaven, right? So that's why
I don't concern myself so much with that particular question. You know, like okay. that would be something that would stem more from an evangelical viewpoint, and I'm not putting that down, by the way. Mm-hmm. You're asking me a question I really can't answer. Okay. I'm not claiming even that my interpretations are canonically correct. I can only tell you the consequences of having released them into the world, let's say.
Right, so I guess we've kind of come to a conclusion about that, which I've kind of wrestled with your framework and pushed it kind of to its end, at least in the way that you can answer my question. So I don't know that we can more wrestle with that topic,
I guess the problem is, you see, I don't exactly understand, I don't think anybody does, the relationship between fact and destiny. Okay. You know, well, they're different realms in a way, because knowing what the world is made of doesn't help you navigate through it. Not really. It doesn't provide you with a foundation for navigation.
It's true.
But knowing the facts of the world is obviously useful. And the relationship between those two things, part of that's the mystery of Western civilization and the continued competition between science and religion.
To bridge this kind of understanding between fact and destiny is like an important question that the burden is on Christianity to answer, and specifically interpretations of Christianity. And if we can't do that,
why is the burden on Christianity?
Because it posits, right, that this interpretation, right, is going to be a way to understand God. But if it's faulty, right, that can
what evidence would you accept?
That would be an interesting question, because I've seen people try to answer the question, and I've never really been moved, because I can always attack and then kind of gets to this point where the answer is I don't know.
Well, here's an answer.
Let's pause there. I'm sorry, that's time.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the rest.
Well, I definitely picked the right person.
Thank you.
That was very good.
Thank you so much.
Very good. I don't like talking to win, but there were portions of all the conversations that were truly...
Okay. Jordan just likes to virtue signal that he is better than an atheist from our Twitch chat. I'm not sure if that's just what he's doing. I'm not sure if that's really what he's doing. I think his perspective is better than the atheistic perspective. If he's virtuous signaling, then I certainly don't agree with that. That's not really the sense I got from that conversation, at least. It actually seems like Jordan Peterson was willing to admit that his framework doesn't go far enough to answer the really fundamental questions. But I think if you had an actual Christian apologist on here, an actual Christian, they would be able to answer some of those questions. So I would compel people to seek out real Christian apology, theology. And I would, not that Jordan Peterson will ever hear or care about this, but I would compel him to consider the theological next in order to be able to answer the questions that Sina was proposing. Because there are answers, truly. But that's okay. Jordan didn't get there yet. Should we do something a little more sensational? Like, I know there was like a sound bite where this guy thought he like pwned Jordan Peterson. I pwned Jordan Peterson. He's going to go home and tell all his like fucking Magic the Gathering buddies about he pwned Jordan. I think it was this kid. Was it this kid?
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found.
Well, if he was posing as a Christian for clout, then he's doing a really bad job, because most Christians are going to say he's not a Christian at all. So if he's posing as a Christian for clout, he is not even posing as a Christian. So fair enough if that's what you see it as. I'm not sure what kind of clout he would get out of that. I guess maybe from Christian communities, but probably most of his audience aren't Christian. Anyway.
found in science. It would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure, but I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess
How is that relevant to this claim?
you're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
What typical Christians?
yeah, typically when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in an
How
all-knowing.
about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean
How
when
is
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
I agree. They should have combat to the death to decide who wins. Imagine Jordan Peterson fighting this kid. I genuinely don't know who would win. So Jordan does that thing where this kid asks him a very simple question. Do you believe in the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God? I think any Christian is just going to say, yes, I do. And then they might push it further, but what do you mean by believe? What do you mean by all good, all powerful, et cetera, et cetera? But Jordan makes it very difficult, very difficult. And there's another moment where you certainly can't claim Jordan to be a Christian if he doesn't answer that question, really. So let's see what kind of gotcha this kid has prepared for him. I'm not saying I support this style, I'm not saying I support this guy's opinion. I just think if this were a Christian, it would have been a lot more direct, a lot simpler.
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if
What's
you
a belief?
believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
How would you define belief? Something you say?
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your
Don't be
life.
so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your
It's
life.
so serious.
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Okay, VRDVN says I could argue for Scientology if I'm allowed to argue like that. Yeah, that is sort of the problem. It's funny that Jordan describes this definition of belief that includes dying for your belief, that includes the possibility of worshiping separate and various things, which would be sort of like almost like having multiple gods. But then it seems like he could defend multiple gods using this sort of strange tact. And so I'm not saying he's doing that, but at least that is the danger of this type of hyper psychologizing or trying to... Yeah, he's just doing the questions by arguing semantics. Yeah, exactly. The semantic arguing doesn't really work. It doesn't prove anything because the kid has a good response. He goes, well, I believe this pen exists, but I wouldn't die for it. So that's fair. I mean, if Jordan defines belief as something you'll die for, then, I mean, I don't believe anything except for the lordship of Christ and his teaching and his following. I would certainly die for that, but I wouldn't die for the belief that, you know, red is my favorite color. Well, that's not even true, but if it were true. So I think there's a spectrum of belief, and I think you can have propositional beliefs. I think you can have all the beliefs that he described. But your belief in God or the thing you worship the most probably should be something you're willing to die for. There should be something you're willing to die for. Something. But not every belief, obviously.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example.
Look at him. He's such a beast. Look at his face, dude. He hates this kid. I kind of hate this kid too, to be fair, but I think there's a better way to approach this.
Like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them.
Example.
Would you lie to like the Nazis? If
I
they're
would have
asking?
done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that
would
situation
you
to
lie?
begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals.
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
Why?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
Look,
Did you eat
don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking if
you
you ate
are.
it. today.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical.
I would do
It's true.
everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have, and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position? Because
I
you don't
did
like, are you like
clarify it.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask you.
It's just a
did you-
basic
yeah, yeah.
hypothetical
Like,
where you're,
like
you
if you
put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just a basic.
Let me give an example of why this. Oh yeah. He admits to lying. Everybody lies. Yeah, I think this technically what he's defending here is that lying is a sin. I'm not saying he's saying he's never lied or he wouldn't lie or he doesn't lie, but he's not supporting lying no matter what. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. But to point out a little more graphically, perhaps, a little to show why this guy's example, his hypothetical, actually is wrong. It's fallacious. It's actually not a good way to get to the bottom of Jordan Peterson's belief structure or sort of elucidate anything about belief, is because I could give this guy the exact same hypothetical, the exact same circumstance, and I would just say, if you're in Nazi Germany and you are hiding a Jewish person and a Nazi comes and says, I need you to have sex with a dog. Otherwise, we're going to put you in a concentration camp and we're going to put your family in a concentration camp. Would you have sex with a dog in that circumstance? Right? And so you go, well, no, of course I wouldn't have sex with a dog, but I have to save my friends and my family, but I don't want to have sex with a dog, but I have to save my friends and my family, but I wouldn't have sex with a dog. And so even though the lying example is a little less like extreme than that, that is exactly what you're doing. So you can present any hypothetical to anybody when it comes to, VRD. And honestly, that's kind of what Jordan Peterson's saying. I would knock the Nazi out. I would escape. I would do something heroic and courageous, right? But I liked Jordan Peterson's line. If you present me an intractable moral position, will I do this or will I do that? Sure, I'll have sex with the dog to do that. But does that make it right to have sex with a dog? Does that make it not a sin? Does that make it something that's acceptable, that's moral, anything of the above? No, of course not, because the hypothetical is designed to trap you between making one bad decision or another bad decision, right? So that's why the hypotheticals are bad. For ice cream, that is exactly what we're doing right now. That's exactly what we're doing. So welcome, brother. Thank you for joining. Feel free to join the Discord if you'd like. And we talked about the most lucid and interesting conversation he had, which at the very end with the person Xena, who asked some good questions. And now we're kind of going to the more sensational bits. And we're talking about Jordan, if he's a Christian, which, spoiler alert, I don't think he is, but I don't think he's far off. Oh, the Discord is locked. Okay. You have to accept the... If you go to the rules tab, this might be why it's locked. Press accept rules here. I don't like having rules, but my mod convinced me. So that's where we're at. And let me know if that doesn't work. If that doesn't work, then I'll figure it out at some later date. But hopefully that works. Maybe I'll just... Let's see. Can I get like a more? Nope. Well, all right. Let me see. Let me know if it works. Okay, so cool. Feel free to join the stage, brother, if you want to talk. Or sister. I guess I don't know who you are, but if you want to join the stage, you can talk. Otherwise, enjoy the different tabs. We have a meme tab. We got. Oh, there you are in the. Welcome, brother. Welcome. Okay. Cool. And we'll continue with this.
Obviously, you would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question for some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist?
What?
Like, so you're
Why
anti-fascist?
are you asking that?
What kind of question is that? What kind of question is that? Seriously. What? I know it's easy to give shit to Jordan Peterson here because he's supposed to be a Christian in this debate and he's not, and they actually even changed the title of it because of that. I mean, what kind of question is that? Truly, are you against fascism? Duh. I don't know. What the hell?
But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save someone's life.
I'm answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's not
manner
what
you
truth
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously, right? Logically, because that's
No.
already happened. Like, that's in the past. You don't have a time travel device. We're bringing this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, you would lie to save people's lives. So your definition of truth isn't actually how we're typically using it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really like want to be associated with
I can
Christianity with that
imagine
respect.
that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could manage. But that would likely indicate that I had made all sorts of catastrophic errors on my way there.
So
Right.
you would lie to save someone's life. So again, you do believe it to be true in that circumstance, even though you like lied in that scenario.
Gotcha. Oh, I win. I beat you, Jordan Peterson. I'm such a cool millennial, or Gen Z. I beat Jordan Peterson. How cool am I? Let's see what does Augustine say about lying to save someone's life, like a family member? So this kid goes, actually, Christians, they don't like you because you're saying you wouldn't lie to save someone's life. Hey, what's up, Newman? Welcome, brother. Welcome. And in the Twitch chat, VRDVN says, Jordan has agreed to lying in previous videos, though. I think I agree. I think his argument is not that he never has lied or that he would never lie or there isn't any situation where he wouldn't lie. I think he's saying that lying is always wrong, even if he's done it, even if you have to do it. And that's why we're looking up Augustine's view of lying, because he has a very similar take. So when this kid says, well, Christians don't like you because you wouldn't even lie to save someone's life, well, Augustine wouldn't either. So if you don't like Jordan Peterson for that reason, then you've got some bigger problems with the church fathers. I hate to break it to you. So Augustine believes all lies are sinful. He defines a lie as a false signification with the will to deceive, and holds that every lie is a sin, regardless of the motive. Intention doesn't justify the act. Even if a lie is told with good intentions, i.e. to save a life, Augustine argues it still violates God's commandment not to lie. Truth as a moral absolute. For Augustine, truth is sacred because God is truth. To lie, even to prevent harm, is to betray God. No exceptions. He explicitly rejects the idea that lying is justified in situations like protecting others, including family members from murder or persecution. On lying, he says, however, if one person lies in order to save another from death, he sins indeed, though one may say it is a pardonable sin. And I think that makes sense. So he refers to these as venial sins, but he does not condone them. So an example of how Augustine would sort of how he would sort of address this problem, this hypothetical of would you lie to a Nazi to save the Jewish family you're hiding in your attic, he would say do everything truthful that you can and also still try to save the family. So if the Nazis come and say, who are you hiding? What are you hiding? You offer your own life. You say, take me away. Take me away. I'm the person you're looking for. Something like that, right? Okay. So I got American in the chat. Welcome, brother. Welcome. Everyone feel free to join that Discord if you like. In the Twitch chat, VRDVN says, have you read the Sam Harris book about lying? It's pretty good. No, I haven't read it. That sounds interesting. Check that out. Is it just lies or being deceitful in general? I think any desire to deceive or act of deception is sinful. Now, listen, I'm not claiming to be like morally perfect, like I've never lied, or that I wouldn't lie to protect a Nazi family. I'm just agreeing with Augustine and agreeing with Jordan Peterson here that when you lie, you are sinning, right? Lying is a sin. So avoid it. Stop it. Be honest. That is the call here. Are there intense, insane, hypothetical situations where maybe it's, almost impossible not to lie in order to save your family's life or something like that? Of course there are. And of course God is merciful and understanding. But that doesn't mean you should lie. That doesn't mean there's a ontological pardon for lying in certain circumstances. We're commanded not to lie. And that's pretty much all he's saying. VRDVN says, any portrayal of reality that you don't believe is true is lying. Yeah, and even lies of omission, according to Augustine, or maybe that was Aquinas, but I think it was Augustine that said even lies of omission are lies, are deceptive. So that's like when somebody says, what's an example of a lie of omission? It's like, did you, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something crazy. Like, oh, did you pay your taxes? And then you go, yes, I paid my taxes. But you didn't say I paid my taxes this year, right? Like you didn't pay your taxes this year, but at some point in the past you paid your taxes. That would kind of be a lie of omission. I don't know. That's a bad example. American, yeah, we can watch that. Because I checked out the first few minutes, but then I wanted to watch it on stream, the Shroud of Turin video with Michael Knowles. And VR DVN says you don't need to be religious to understand that, though. No, certainly you don't need to be religious. But I do think that is part of the law that God writes on our hearts, that we understand, even if you don't profess the lordship of God, or even if you don't believe in any God, you understand in your heart that it's wrong to lie. So there was one more gotcha moment I wanted to break down where really the guy, I think it was this kid. Yeah, I think it was this kid. This was the most frustrating to me, and we're going to break down why this is not good argumentation. So Numenon says, but does someone who wants you to tell him something so he can use it to sin really deserve to know that thing? Well, this is how you would approach that. You would tell him the truth, whatever he's going to use for sin, and you say, don't use this to sin. This is the truth. Like the truth, the actual truth will never be used for sin, right? It would take somebody distorting the truth into an untruth in order for them to use it to sin, right? So you would say, this is the truth. This is the full truth. Don't distort it. Don't use it to sin. That's how I would address that, Numenon. VRDVN says, it's so hard not to lie, though. You can tell that person to tell him, I don't want to tell you. Oh, yeah, in response to Numenon. Yeah. Yeah, and that wouldn't be a lie. Yeah, to say, I can't tell you that, or I don't want to tell you that, right? That's not a lie. That's just asserting your authority to convey information or not. Especially if you're honest that, like, yes, I know the answer, but I won't tell you. So seek it out yourself. But it could be even better just to tell him and then clarify and then say, yes, this, well, I don't even know what this hypothetical is, but I think if you tell the full truth, you're not going to compel people to sin, usually, if ever. I just feel like I'd be participating or helping them to sin if I was honest with that person. Yeah, I guess I need to, maybe I'm a little more specific about what this scenario is. Like, I can't think of an example right now. Like, I guess if someone was like, I really don't know. Is it, Yeah, and then VRDVN says, if that's how you feel, Numenon, truly, then just say, I won't tell you. And that's not a lie. That's not a lie at all. Right, and Numenon says, sometimes silence gives away the truth, so I don't think remaining silent always works. That is addressed in the Nazi thing as well. The Nazi hypothetical, would you hide a Jewish family? If you don't say anything, like at all, then they're going to assume you're hiding them, right? So VRNDVN says, keeping privacy is not lying. Yeah, and I think you can say, I don't know what you have to say in the Nazi example. It's really, really tough. I think most of us are just going to lie. But again, yeah, I don't know. That's why that hypothetical is so difficult. It's obviously also not the world we live in right now. So it's kind of like it is trying to win the argument, trying to get this gotcha on someone. And VRNDVN says everything is fair in warfare, though. I mean, I don't believe that, but I get you. I do understand your point. All's fair in love and war. Probably one of the greatest untruths that is propagated through culture. Obviously, all is not fair. In real love and true love, it is. But in love as we know it as people, and love as a lot of people exercise it, there's a lot of unfairness, and especially in war as we know it. VR and DVN says all is not fair in love, but I would also say all is not fair in war. So
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I could flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay, do Catholics attend to Mary?
Yes.
Okay, so do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
Well, they might not put her in the highest
But
place.
Got him. Look how they cut to that other annoying kid who's just trying to win the interaction and get this gotcha. He's like, yes, we're about to nail Jordan Peterson on Mary. Jordan Peterson, anti-Catholic? Jordan Peterson hates Mary? Like, dude, okay. We'll let this play out so we get the full point, but what this kid is trying to trap Jordan Peterson in, this like little semantic word game he's doing, like, what is your definition of worship? Okay, so by your definition, that's it. That's the whole definition. Okay, by that definition, Catholics worship Mary. Is that right? And it's like, no, you idiot. Jordan Peterson, worship is like the thing you give your attention to, the thing you attend to, the thing you sacrifice for. But it's hierarchical, okay? So if you worship some things more than others, for instance, given that definition, you could say, I worship stand-up comedy, right? But or streaming or something. Do I worship those things like I worship God? Of course not. In fact, I save the word worship for the highest thing in that hierarchy, which is God. That's why we say that I'm not Catholic, so I'll throw that out there. But that's why Catholics say that they venerate the Mother Mary, because you attend to her. You would sacrifice for her. You give her honor and glory, as much honor and glory as the Lord Jesus Christ, as God the Father, as the Holy Spirit. No Catholic thinks that you worship Mary above God. So this is a semantic trick, a word game. I think Jordan Peterson does a good job of, like, we'll see, but like deflecting it or pointing out this guy's fallacy. But just look how excited they are. Look how annoyingly excited they are that we pwned Jordan Peterson. Pwn. We pwned his ass. Like, come on, dude. Okay. So American M says, saving a life is more important than a lie. Numenon says, I actually think I need to think this through more thoroughly, but there might be also a worldview thing going on where God will always give some alternative, but you just need to find it. Yeah, I think there's that. VR and DVN in the Twitch chat says, what's the point of saving a life if you had to lie for it, though? And that is a good question. And I guess to tie it together with Numenon's point, will God ever ask you to sin, even to save a life? I don't think so. I don't think he will. So to Numenon's point, I think there kind of always could be a way out. Now, certainly lying will be the easiest way out in a lot of circumstances, but we're not compelled to do the easy thing. We're compelled to do the hard thing as Christians. Numenon says, I think some Catholics say they also worship Mary, but there are different levels of worship, and only God deserves the highest level. Exactly, Numenon. And then in the Twitch chat, we have, in Nazi scenario, it would be better to try and fight the Nazis, and I agree with that. So imagine, so here's a potential answer to the Nazi situation. Nazis knock on your door, you're hiding your Jewish neighbors in the attic. Nazi says, are you hiding any Jews here? And you just punch him, right? Punch the Nazi. That's what we're all about in our culture, right? Punch a Nazi. I'm not talking about a conservative. I'm talking about an actual Nazi, right? Punch the Nazi. Resist. Fight them. Say nothing. Don't answer their question about the Jewish neighbor, right? Say, I won't tell you, and then punch him in the head. You know what's going to happen? They're going to take you in. They're going to put you in prison. They're going to put you in a concentration camp. But it's possible that they would not then search your house, especially if you don't say anything. They'll probably just assume you're the Jewish person there, right? So is that deceptive? No. Is that resisting evil? Yes. Is that a legitimate thing you can do? Yes, it would be to sacrifice yourself for that family. Yeah, and to VRN DVN's point, it's quite moral to fight and die for your family and friends. Yeah. In fact, Jesus himself says the highest form of love is laying your life down for your friends, right? Actually, is that Jesus? I think that was Christ himself that said that in the gospel. Well, let's find that. John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So that would be the highest expression of love. That's the highest expression. To actually defend the family that you're protecting, that you're hiding, right? Okay, so let's get back to this stupid gotcha. This kid irks me a lot more than this one. This one at least had his like sort of classic atheist debate style. Like he at least had talking points. The current guy's really going for a gotcha, which is just bad form, you know?
I would put it that way.
No.
You just said it. Now you're taking it back.
There's still a
just said
hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within the
There's something at the top.
All right, you can worship things
Mary is
below.
quite a ways up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's go over your definition of worship again. What's your definition of worship?
Attend to,
Attend to.
prioritize,
Do
and
Catholics
sacrifice for.
what do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No.
No, they don't. They prioritize Jesus Christ over all other human beings. So this kid's logic is already falling apart. But
I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't add that to my definition.
You understand?
I said there was a hierarchy as well.
You attend.
So you can attend to something trivially, or you can attend to it deeply.
And now you're adding stuff to the definition. But your original
I
definition.
added the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you
just
familiar?
didn't understand it.
Are you familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently.
you go to a Catholic church, don't you? What, are you spying on him? I mean, what? How do you know, dude? Even if he went to a Catholic church, does that mean he agrees with the Immaculate Conception? No, he's not even a baptized Catholic, I'd imagine. Right? Like, okay, maybe even if he is, how is this relevant to your point? Okay, so Nuanon says, I just don't know if lying is always a sin. If the Nazis will know and find the Jews and overpower you if you try to fight, it feels like lying would be the only way I can protect them. That's why Augustine makes the distinction between a venial sin, as in forgivable, and an unforgivable sin. In that very specific circumstance, Augustine's going to say, yes, it is a sin, right? Because anything that is not truth is sin, right? God is truth. God is maximal truth. So things that don't comport to maximal truth is sin, right? But the question is, how serious of a sin is it, right? It's certainly not on the lying to save a family or save a life, save your family, your friends. No, that's not gonna, damn you to hell. That's going to be forgivable. That's obviously a nuanced situation. But does that mean we can say that you can lie and not be sinning? No, I just don't think you can say that, because God is truth. So anything that's not truth is not of God. It's not from God. So it's sinful. And VRNDVN says, because even if you lie at some point, you will have to deal and confront the Nazis. You're just delaying the confrontation. And he also says, and this is important, 99% of the times lying is just bad. Right. So we're talking about these crazy hypotheticals that none of us will ever be faced with. And so the larger message, like the actual direction that we should be oriented towards, is just never lying. Right. Yeah, you can imagine situations, well, maybe it's better to lie than not to lie here and here and here. But what's the point? What's the point of the gospel? What's the point of Jesus' teaching of the Bible? The point overall is don't lie, right? So that's why these gotchas are like just not fruitful. American says these kids are cringe, and I'm not on either side. Yeah, these guys are cringe. These two are cringe. The last person, Zena, she's awesome. She asks great questions. She's intellectually engaged. She's not trying to win the conversation. She's not trying to catch Jordan. This guy is trying to get a clip. He's trying to go viral, and he's trying to brag to his friends, I pwned Jordan Peterson, when actually he didn't. He didn't pwn him at all. But
Interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
How do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
highly, but not the highest. That's the point. That's the only answer. I mean, why is he asking this? Truly.
Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this?
And there you go. And that's the main confusion about this. My theory is that Jubilee did not tell Jordan Peterson the title of this video. I think they probably told him, hey, do you want to debate 20 atheists? And he was like, yeah, great. I'll debate 20 atheists. And then they named the video One Christian versus 20 atheists. But they clearly renamed the video because we find out here Jordan Peterson isn't exactly a Christian. Call me old-fashioned or whatever, but this is true. I think you can't be a Christian unless you openly profess Christ to man. Man and woman. I'm using man in the German sense, Mann. So, yes, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that I'm not judging Jordan Peterson's state of salvation, his soul, his heart, his mind. It's possible that he's just flooded with the love of Christ and he's given his whole heart away, his whole life away to Christ. But he's not at the point where he is a Christian yet because he's not openly defending Christ. He's not openly supporting and following Christ. When he asks a question like that, you say that, but I don't. I think if we look at Jordan in 5-10 years, if I'm right, if my guess is right, or even less, God willing, he would just say, yes, I am. Let's continue. Instead of you say that, not me. So that was a big viral moment. I mean, whatever. I don't think it's that special, but
Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Yeah.
And I mean
Either you're a
'cause I
Christian
won't
or you're
talk
not.
to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell
could be-
you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression
private.
I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're
probably in the wrong YouTube. Look at his face when he said that, dude. Look at this,
Everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube.
look at that demon face. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video. This is like Karen energy at the fucking grocery store, Hold on, I know there's 15 people behind me. Can you guys just wait 1 second? I forgot to go get potatoes. You're probably in the wrong line. I think you're in the wrong grocery store. I mean, it's so annoying. Why doesn't he answer the question? I think he doesn't answer the question because he is not a Christian, if that's the question you're talking about. If you're talking about Mary, I mean, this is an obvious answer, and I think he does try to give the answer, but he doesn't like this guy's formulation, so that's why he's being difficult. Jordan, I mean. But the answer is yes, Mary is venerated. Yes, you could even say, given this definition of worship, that she's worshipped. But what is worshipped above all? God, Jesus. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple answer. Numenon says, I think Jordan is trying to fit Christianity into some materialist framework through Jungian psychology. Might be wrong, though, but it's very confusing. Yes, he is trying to fit Christianity into this Jungian framework. So that is the main problem here. That's why he can't say anything definitively. That's why he can't give simple answers to these questions. And I pray that he'll come out more strongly as a defender of Christ and a lover of Christ and a follower of Christ. But for now, certainly that's not really what he's doing. VR and DVN says he knows he will lose the later arguments. Yeah, I think when it comes down to theology, he will lose arguments because he doesn't really defend any theology. And he says most Christians don't fit Christianity that way, though. And that's probably true. Okay, I'm going to play this for a second, and I'm going to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
To video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him. Hi there.
Hi, nice
What's
to meet
your
you.
name?
Gerard.
Hello, Gerard.
Nice to meet you, sir. So you've said that worship is when you prioritize and sacrifice for something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a hierarchy in there.
Sure. So I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street, right?
Probably, yeah.
Presumably. Do I worship
I don't know,
my
I've
wife?
seen some pretty bad marriages.
Assuming a good marriage, are you saying I worship my wife?
I'm trying to define worship.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So prioritize and sacrifice. I do
The
those
higher it
things.
is in the hierarchy, the more what you're doing is akin to worship. But even in your
Okay.
trivial acts of attention, you're prioritizing and partaking in worship, even if you don't know it.
So I am
And it's
prioritizing.
partly, well, with regard to your wife, say. So why do you value your wife? You do value your
Yes,
wife.
I love
okay.
her, so I
Right,
prioritize and I
okay.
sacrifice for her.
Right. So that's within the confines of love, let's say.
Sure.
What else does it serve?
What else does what serve?
Your love and your marriage.
Okay.
I mean,
All right. Yes. Okay, so VRNDVN says he is defending a version of Christianity that's not what most Christians believe Christianity is to be. Yeah, I would agree with that. What he's defending is the sort of Jungian, like, pragmatism of Christianity, which is fair. There's a place for that to be discussed and argued about and defended. But it's not really the fullness. It's not at all the fullness of the faith, and it's not even really the central thing. The central thing is the person of Christ, the person of Jesus. He's defending fringe Christianity. I mean, really, it's kind of a personal Christianity. Like, I don't think anybody really sees it this way except for Jordan and maybe those who, have learned about this view through Jordan Peterson. So yeah, I'll pray for I'll pray for the centering of Jordan Peterson within the person of Christ. I think that will make his message and his influence much, much greater on the world. This is an interesting comment. Can we do another one but have Jordan Peterson surrounded by 20 Christians? I think that would be equally interesting. I agree. I think that would be really interesting. 20 Jordan Petersons versus one atheist. That's funny. Christianity is nothing without faith, which he does not have. Yeah. And again, I can't speak to what he has in his heart or in his soul, but he certainly doesn't. He doesn't portray it. He doesn't project it, and therefore we can't say that he has any faith. We really can't say that. And you're right. Your faith is dead. If you don't profess, or you really don't have any faith, if you don't believe that Jesus died and was risen for our sins. Now, wasn't there something else we were going to look at? We were going to look at something. Okay, I have
No.
Oh, yeah, right. We're going to look at the Shroud of Turin. Okay, we'll do this.
The shroud is an image of a
Okay. All right, let's first play. Okay, we'll go why believe in the shroud. We'll do a little bit of that, then we'll jump to the arguments against it. And yeah. Okay, in the Twitch chat we have, would you someday look at investor Peter Thiel saying that Christian story version apocalypse is real and will happen? I will definitely look at that. I'm interested in Peter Thiel personally. Have been ever since I was kind of a kid. So we will definitely look at that. Is he a Christian now? Or I kind of forgot. Last time I heard from him, he was sort of like he was kind of like a Jordan Peterson type in that sense, like where, you know, he talked a big game, but I didn't hear him defend Christ or like, you know, profess Christ. But we'll certainly look at that. That sounds really interesting. Actually, can we do that first? Because that is more interesting to me. Christianity. Apocalypse. We'll try that. Cool. Okay, Peter Thiel and his Christian values. This could be interesting.
Well, I think it says.
Cool.
I think that. Well, I believe in the resurrection of Christ. I think that.
There you go.
Resurrection.
The bodily.
Boom. Bodily resurrection of Christ. Instantly, you're way on a higher level than Jordan. I agree with. I won't phrase it exactly like our Twitch chat guy did, but this is already a big step up from the Jordan Peterson perspective. Bodily resurrection of Christ. Very important. He'll just put it out there. He'll profess that, but before man and clearly in his heart. And that's a great spot to be in.
Bodily resurrection of Christ. So I think that's the central miracle, and I think that there is a way in which it gives us an understanding of the world. I think.
VR and DVN says he also has a real job, unlike Jordan. And if you guys don't know, Peter Thiel is like a kind of like a venture capitalist investor. I think some of the things he was involved in were like PayPal, Facebook. You know, he's kind of a Elon Musk type, but under the not like less in the public eye, a little less controversial, obviously. But sort of one of these like eccentric investor billionaire types, right? So it's great to hear one of these guys professing Christ. That is what we need. That's exactly what we need in society. And I'm sure people have problems with Peter Thiel, but I like him personally. So let's see where this goes.
That it is, you know, there's. I studied under René Girard, who's this professor at Stanford, who.
Amazing.
I think was one of the greater Christian thinkers of the 20th century, and
remind me to do some René Girard stuff as well, because he is an amazing thinker. Anyway, we'll do that later. He's also like the evolved version of Jordan Peterson, but like way evolved.
I think that there's an anthropology in Christianity. There's an understanding of human nature, where we're in the image of God. We're mimetic. We try to. You know, and we need good role models. The only good role model for us is Christ. You know, all other role models lead to interpersonal conflicts of one sort or another. And so I think there are sort of a lot of things about it that they're true. There's sort of ways we can, you know, offer an apologetic for it. You know, but it is, you know, on some level, I often think that if you go back to the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, I often think. That the two most important ones are the first and last on the list, the first commandment and the 10th. The first one is you should only worship God. You should look up to the one true God. And then the 10th one is you should not look around at your neighbor. You should not covet the things that belong to your neighbor. And when you know, when you do not have a transcendent religious belief, you end up just looking around at other people. And I think
That's true.
And I think that is sort of the
wise.
problem with our sort of atheist liberal world, that it is just the madness of crowds. It's not reason. It's not rational. It's just mass insanity.
Does that tie into your idea in the book?
There's always I always think if you sort of contrast evangelical Christian Bible study, where the outward-facing thing is often that people are somehow more moral or better, and then the inward-facing thing is that you're kind of sinful and that there's a lot of stuff you fix. If you were in the Bible study and said, I figured out everything's perfect in my life, you probably haven't quite gotten the message.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
But whatever the sort of paradoxes and contradictions around that are, I think there's sort of a strange contrast with what I sort of describe as the atheist rationalist sort of group, where the outward-facing thing is that you're more rational than people, and the inward-facing thing is that you're not capable of thought at all. That it's just spaghetti code, and the mind is not capable of thought. And to use the sort of Thomistic medieval distinction, the medievals believed in the weakness of the will, but the power of the intellect, and the moderns believe in the power of the will, but the weakness of the intellect. And so, I think, yes, I think faith and reason are compatible, and in fact, when you get rid of faith, you end up in a world where there's no reason either, and we're living in a much less rational world than we lived in 100 years ago.
When you talk about, coveting, in your book 0 to 1, you talk about how when you're trying to build a company, and when they get stuck on competing with Hertz, Avis, whatever it is, when they get stuck on competing, they lose sight of the larger goal, which is not just to defeat the other guy, but to do something greater or whatever.
To provide a better product. That's the real goal. I mean, if you focus on providing the best possible product, then you will defeat. It's kind of like what we're talking about, what you worship and what you place in your hierarchies of attention. You place God at the very top, and then things come down, and they flow naturally into a way to structure your life. It's like a mountain, right? God at the top, self, family, community, country, yada, yada, yada. And for a company, I think personally a company should place God at the top as well, and that will help them order everything effectively. But if you place on your hierarchy making a good product above beating the competitor, then you naturally will beat your competitor by making the best product, right? But if you put beating your competitor above making a good product or providing a good service, you could say, then you'll do all sorts of weird stuff that makes your product bad, but maybe just slightly edges out your competitor, if it even does that, right? So I think that's a great point. Okay, so BRNDVN says, I have bought the Regenar books. Is way too hard, though. Yeah, I haven't even attempted to read his books, but we're going to watch a video where he explains his mimetic theory simply, easily, and it's awesome. And Peter never argues in semantics. Yeah, he certainly isn't there. And I have not read his 0 to 1 book. That sounds fascinating. Is that Peter Thiel's book, or is that Rene Girard? I'm guessing Peter Thiel. That sounds... I should check that out for sure. Okay, let's... Okay,
those
let's
ideas tied together, or am I just making that?
Sure. If you're too focused on your enemies, your rivals, your competition, it becomes very hard to form a team that's going to work on some transcendent goal or transcendent purpose. If you categorize it in terms of the 7 mortal sins of medieval Catholicism, I always think, you can sort of debate which ones are the worst. Officially pride is supposed to be the worst. I always think you can use Gilligan's Island as sort of a mnemonic for this, where the professor is pride, and the skipper is anger, and Mr. Howell is greed, and Mrs. Howell is sloth. That's why she married Mr. Howell. Ginger is lust. Gilligan's always eating food. He's gluttony. But Marianne's envy. She wants to be Ginger. And I think,
I've never seen Gilligan's Island, but I feel like that's probably a good analogy. I don't know.
I think in some ways, that's the one I'm most worried about, the Mary Anns in our society. And I believe envy is the one mortal sin that is still completely taboo. All the others can be sort of turned into something positive. Greed is good, Gordon Gekko, whatever. There's sort of ways you can flip all the others around. Envy is the one we still don't talk about, and as a result, I suspect it's the one that's somehow still sort of pervasive and the most destructive.
And it's an interesting point. And the way envy is the driving force of social media apps like Instagram, right? And it's not that you're addicted. I think it's people are addicted to the apps because they have this like pervasive sense of envy that I need to know what everybody's doing. I need to know how good everybody's life is. Oh, look how beautiful that trip to Greece is. Look at their new kid. Look at their new dog. Look at this career advancement, this and this and this. So that's the compelling factor that makes you addicted to using the app, is your sort of like indwelt envy of others. And the compelling force to make you post on Instagram and on these social media apps, of course, not for everybody. You can make good posts. You can make, things that don't involve envy and pride. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of the traps that people fall into on Instagram is the pride of, I need to show everybody how great my life is. And then you mix that with deception when, like, your life isn't that great, but you make this post saying, like, look how perfect everything is. So it's a bit of a mix of pride and sort of deceit, I guess. I'm not really sure. Let's see what VR and DVN says. Envy is a really stupid sin because it's the only one you could never possibly have any fun at. Charlie Munger. Yeah. That's a good quote. It's a good quote. I do think people find it fun to be envious, though. Like, for instance, the popularity of those sort of day in the life of a millionaire in Dubai type videos. Those get millions of views, and that's people, and no, they're not having fun while watching it. So Charlie Munger's quote is still accurate. But that is sort of the compelling thing, is like you click on that video because you want to feel envious. Or of this person. I mean, you don't want to feel envious. You just do feel envious. What you want is to like live that life. So there's a bit of greed there. There's a bit of pride. There's a bit of this and that. But ultimately, the only reason you click it is because you envy them. And I'm the same way. I'm not saying you. I've watched those videos. I've fallen into that trap. I still do, not all the time, especially not anymore. But I think that there's something to that envy is not talked about in our culture, and it's a driving factor for the success of social media. We have a Twitch chat. Zuck hired a lot of psychology and philosophy people while making Facebook. Yeah, I mean, the apps are designed to tap into your psychology. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of them. Twitch, YouTube. Here we are, right? And so these things are tools, and maybe they're designed to, take advantage of your psychology or whatever it is. But the goal is to subvert those tools, to turn them for the glorification and the worship of God. If we do that, then we'll just transfigure this whole system into something beneficial and good and helpful to people. Whereas, as they are right now, they're just sort of centers of sin and amorality. TVN says Zuck is also openly Jewish. So I don't know what the point of that comment is, but there you go. Okay. Let's continue.
To bring things to a shallower level briefly, I should point out that in 2006, we did a Socrates in the City event around C.S. Lewis. And my friend, the film director Norman Stone, is here. He had directed a film about C.S. Lewis. And who showed up?
VRN clarifies, he meant he openly believes in God, unlike Jordan. Fair enough. Good. Yeah. Zuck, I think Zuck could make a turnaround, or I don't know if he's good or bad. I have no judgment about Mark Zuckerberg. I like that he was honest about how his app was misused by our government, or how his company was compelled by our government to suppress information. And he obviously did that, which was bad at the time. He capitulated to the government. But he turned around and came out and said that he did that. He was honest about that. And hopefully the implication is that they won't do that again. VRN says also Zuck has a real job, unlike Jordan. Fair enough. And he says Peter Thiel was first venture capitalist into Facebook. That's right. And was on the board of directors. So that's what it was. Facebook. Right. So that's one of his main things. That's interesting. I mean, maybe Facebook isn't, a lot of people are hypercritical of Mark Zuckerberg. I'm less critical of him now than I was before. But it's possible all of that was for the purpose of some good end. I'm not sure. And I'd be interested in what Peter Thiel's mindset was around investing in Facebook. Maybe he was investing in it for some good end. I don't know. Not sure.
Up with a friend to that event, to my shock, but I have a picture, Tina Louise, who played Ginger. Just so we know that really happened. That really happened. Well, you talk about in the book, and it's all related. I mean, it's interesting to me. But you say that we've given up our sense of wonder at secrets left to be discovered. So to go back to the beginning of the conversation, the idea that we could wipe out cancer or Alzheimer's or anything like that. So two questions. First of all, why are you hopeful, if you are hopeful? And also related to the sense of wonder and the secrets left to be discovered, I think somehow, I would argue, and maybe this goes against this interiority idea of yours, but that God, faith in God, is an endlessly self-revealing secret. In other words, that as we pursue God, we are inescapably pursuing a kind of science, because to know God is to become more and more grounded in the reality of his creation, and that those things are related. So the first question was, why are you hopeful if you think we've given up our sense of wonder at secrets left to be discovered?
Well, I think, I don't think we're at the end of history. I don't think we know everything. I certainly refuse to believe that everything has been discovered that's going to be discovered. And I think there are all sorts of contexts where we can still come to understand new things. I think, just to push back a little bit on, sort of the I don't think there's anything wrong with Christian interiority the way you describe it, but I always think it would be somewhat inadequate if it was just that and nothing more. When I was an undergraduate, the campus crusade idea was still always, God has a plan for you and for your life, and you can figure it out. But then it would translate into a vocation, to something you were supposed to do. We don't talk like that anymore.
As a culture, not just Christians.
As Christians, we don't talk like that anymore, and it's sort of much more the sort of pop psychology, a la Jordan Peterson or something like that.
There you go. I don't think. Look at that. It all comes around. I was not expecting that, to be fair. But there's no such thing as coincidences. So we're exactly where we are meant to be. Interesting.
I think it has to be more than just psychological.
That's great. I mean, yeah, Peter Thiel's based. What can you say? Peter Thiel is absolutely based. Okay, now and we will get back to the Shroud of Turin, but we've done that before, and I don't think we've gotten into Rene Girard before, and it's really, really interesting stuff. And we'll try to follow along if we can. So, I guess we could start. This is the full video, and it's all very interesting. Well, let's do the full video, and we'll see where we...
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. twitter.com/UncKnowledge. Born in Avignon on Christmas Day 1923, René Girard is the author of works that have been published in more than 24 languages, including The Scapegoat and Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. His latest book, Achevé Clausewitz, will be published in the United States in 2010 as Battling to the End: Politics, War, and Apocalypse. In 2005, Professor Girard received the highest honor in France, induction as one of the 40 members of the Académie Française. One source of René Girard's thinking, a close reading of The Golden Bough, Sir James Fraser's classic study of ancient myths. Published in 1890, The Golden Bough explained that myths throughout the ancient world contained a central element, the periodic sacrifice of a sacred king, dying and then resurrected. Christianity, The Golden Bough suggested, represented nothing but one more such myth, a point to which we will return. René Girard, bienvenue.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Segment 1, Insights. Mimetic desire. To quote one of your interpreters, Gil Bailey, quote, "Desire, as distinguished from animal appetite, is always aroused by the desire of another." Explain.
If, in order to invent desire, because desire is not natural, desire is not animal. Is it human? We don't know. It sometimes is human, sometimes it seems very inhuman. But how is it born? I think desire usually is born out of the contemplation of someone else who is desiring and who designates to you the object he's desiring as desirable.
So every college student who wants to be an investment banker, obvious, they want to fly around in their own jet and
Yes.
drive a Maserati. But how does this apply to the ancient world?
So let's just be clear about what he... Okay, so we got a chat. Interesting that both Peter Thiel and Alex Karp were philosophy majors. I don't know who Alex Karp is, personally, so feel free to tell us, give us who that is. That's interesting. But so to sum up what was just said, René Girard, his focus is on something called, that he created or expounded on, or is the father of thought around mimetic desire. That when we desire something, we're almost always, usually, he says, desiring it because we look at another person who desires that object, that thing, and therefore it gives us, it allows us to assign to that object desirability in general, right? So that desire doesn't happen in a vacuum, doesn't happen just within you. You need someone else to confirm what you desire. And this is mimetic. So you see someone want something that makes you want it via them, right? Okay, so we'll see where this goes. It gets more and more interesting, especially when it comes to the ancient world and mythology. So,
well, to the ancient world, it has to apply in the same fashion. The objects are different, but the structure of desire, the triangular relationship of desire, object, model, and subject are the same.
Serpent, Eve, apple.
Serpent in the mimetic theory of desire is a symbol, an image of the mediator. In other words, the one who directs the subject towards the bad desire. The churches, who know what they're talking about much better than most people think, know that example is the key to bad as well as good behavior. And this is nothing but what I call mimetic desire.
So that's why the church uses the phrase the occasion of sin.
Yes.
Now, Gil Bailey, once again, the imitative nature of desire leads to conflict.
it leads to conflict. And this is both something very obvious and which is a paradox for most people when they first realize it. If you imitate the desire of someone else, you admire that someone else, or that someone else may be your best friend. But as soon as you both desire the same object, and the objects really desirable exist only in one copy.
In ones.
So I shouldn't say copy because it's not a copy. It's the original.
There is only one.
There is
Helen,
only one
Helen of Troy.
Original, and therefore they have to fight. Therefore, the theatrical situation par excellence is a situation of two people desiring the same object because they designate that object to each other. Once the imitated subject realizes he is imitated, this reinforces his desire. He said, I certainly selected the right object. As soon as this man saw her, he fell in love with her, like I did. Therefore, we are right. Therefore, I'm more convinced than ever that I should desire her. Therefore, he's my enemy.
All right. I'm chuckling because as the audience will learn, as simple as it sounds, it explains everything in a way. Let me quote you yourself, Renee, this time. If this moves on to your second basic insight, the violence and the sacred. If there is a normal order in societies, it must be the fruit of an anterior crisis. Explain.
It must be the result of an interior crisis because people polarize around objects of desire. And this can be regarded as true even for food, for shelter, for places where you can live and so forth. So you can be sure that the human population in prehistorical time gathered around the same places because they were desirable, because there was water there and so forth. And they were united by that same desire. And they were separated because very often there was not enough of whatever was needed, water, shelter, food, and they started to fight. That's why I don't think we should say man is so bad, you know, that he would always fight with his fellow man, even when he associates. The people he associates most closely with are the people he fights most often with. They do because they are both moving toward the same thing.
Isn't that interesting? So we fight, we commit violence, we become violent when the object of our desire is the object of desire of our fellow man, when we both want the same thing and there isn't enough to go around. That makes sense. That it seems to explain conflict generally, right? Now, what's the key here? And Rene Girard is maybe going to say this in so many words, I'm not sure. But if you desire Christ, if you desire God, then there's more than enough to go around, right? Because God is infinite. Christ is enough for all of us to be fulfilled within him. So if you place your desire, your object of desire, at anything below divinity, but below Christ, then you can have violence because there isn't enough, right? If you place your desire at money or water prehistorically or whatever it is, you create a lack because there's not enough to go around, and you get fighting. If all you desire is God, all you desire is union with Jesus, then there's more than enough to go around. So there's not violence, right? Okay, so moving on an unrelated note, do you think AI will be able to do philosophy? Now, that's a good question. I guess it kind of depends on what we mean by philosophy, right? So I think AI currently can do philosophy in the sense that it can expound on philosophical ideas. But if what we mean or it can explain philosophical ideas. It knows the history of philosophy. It can write you a paper about any philosophical topic, right? But if the question is, can AI choose between, make a decision between two philosophical structures, two competing philosophical ideas, clearly right now it can't, right? It has no will. It has no, it's sort of like a calculator or a machine. You put in an input and it spits out an output, right? It's very one-to-one. But if what we mean by philosophy is the genuine sort of reflection and introspection about what is philosophically true, I don't think AI is currently capable of doing that. Will it be able to? That's a great question. I in a way, I hope it will be able to. The only thing that will allow it to really do philosophy, I think, is if somehow, by the grace of God, or by the will of God, AI is allowed to have a soul. That's a little bit of a loose way to put it. But in order to choose between philosophical ideas, I think AI is going to have its own sort of personhood before it can really do that. But that's an interesting question. Very interesting question, Nothin. What do you think? Do you think AI does philosophy now? Do you think it will be able to in the future? I'll extend that to the whole chat. I guess the extension of that question is AI able to discover anything new? I really don't know. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Can AI make new discoveries in philosophy, in theology, and sociology, and even in anything, really? I'm not sure. It's not clear right now whether it can do that. Let's continue with Renee.
And these things are never in sufficient number. Or even if they are, you tend to trust your model because you admire him. So you say, he's seen in the object something more than I saw, and therefore I must follow him more than ever. And this works both ways. As the one who desires first is imitated in his desire, he's confirmed in that desire. But the conflictual situation is all over the place. It's coming from everywhere.
All right. Segment 2, the scapegoating mechanism. We now have, let's say we're in the prehistoric world. You're describing the most basic sources of conflict, and now the most basic means of resolving conflict.
Yeah, because the question is how such conflicts resolved. They have to be resolved at least part of the time for groups of human beings to gather permanently together and so forth.
So the question is, how do societies manage to exist?
People imitate each other. People imitate each other in their desire. But they also imitate each other in their dislikes, I just said. And therefore, when you have a conflict which is particularly visible and obvious and so forth, there will be a tendency for the neighbors of the people concerned to move with the stronger of the two, the most convincing of the two, and be on his side against the other one. And when you have a second one, you have a third one, a fourth one, it becomes easier and easier. And the mimetic, because all this is always mimetic. You see, that's the thing you have to see. The real motor is imitation each time. Imitation of friendship, imitation of desire, and imitation of conflict. So, if it is so, there should not be any human society. It should be impossible.
Total conflict all the time.
Total conflict all the time.
Interesting. Okay, so then to Nimnon, I think philosophy is done through and to explain the phenomenological experiences we have. I think AI would be at a severe disadvantage to humans. Because they don't have their own experiences. They don't have a phenomenological experience. So to your next question, do you think AI could have come up with these ideas about mimetic desires? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. It's a good question because it speaks to whether, say, mimetic desire or some kind of high Teuton philosophy is strictly observable given facts, or whether it's something that can only be observed through the unique human experience, right? And that's kind of what I was asking. Like, if AI can come up with new ideas, like for instance, in this case, mimetic desire. If there were no Rene Girard, and we fed the entire, human history, which we have done, the entire human mythology into an AI system, would it be able to come up with this sort of intricate, nuanced thing? It's not really clear, is it? Should we ask? Should we ask? Can you do philosophy? Absolutely. I can help with philosophy across a wide range of areas, including ethics. Yeah. Metaphysics. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm wondering if you can create/derive new ideas never before spoken or expressed by humans. Yeah, DVN says, wouldn't it be funny if ChatGPT was just Jordan Peterson and it answered, what is do? What is you? What is philosophy? Okay, great question. You're asking something deep about creativity and the boundaries between human and machine thought. Yes, I can generate new combinations of ideas, suggest novel arguments, and even propose original concepts that haven't been directly expressed before by humans, but there are limits. So what I can do is synthesize ideas in ways that haven't been done before, invent hypotheticals, theories, or arguments that may be novel in formulation, offer new terminology or metaphors, extend or critique philosophical systems. In short, I can play in the same intellectual sandbox as a human philosopher, inventing, extrapolating, and combining ideas in generative ways. What I don't do, I don't have consciousness or intentionality, so I don't intend originality like a human might. I can't guarantee that an idea is completely unprecedented. And my creativity is constrained by what I've been trained on, which includes a lot, but not everything, and I don't have access to the internet during training. Yeah, should we just ask it? Please invent an original philosophical idea. Should we ask it to use mythology, use the entire corpus of human mythology and symbolism to create a new philosophical concept. Let's see how it does with that. Should be interesting. Okay. Yes, and ChatGPT does lie. So yeah, I'm not saying just because it says it can do that it actually can. That's why it's kind of interesting to actually test it. We got a link here to Grok. I'll just open that because I trust you. But it wasn't shared correctly, so that's okay. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so this is a new concept created by ChatGPT. And again, let's remember Numenon's point. ChatGPT lies. It does lie, especially when it doesn't know. So concept summary, the Ouroboros mirror. The Ouroboros mirror is a philosophical idea about the self as an infinite self-reflecting cycle of becoming and knowing, symbolized by the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, and the mirror, reflection, identity, and perception. The Ouroboros represents eternal cycles, renewal, and self-consumption. It's found across many cultures. Fair enough. The mirror symbolizes self-awareness, perception, and truth. But see, this is interesting. This is not really a new idea. I mean, this is kind of new age, like whatever, classic new age stuff. But also, it uniquely describes itself, right? So the Orborg mirror describes a self not as a static essence or a linear story, but as a dynamic process of infinite self-reflection and transformation. Isn't that exactly what a large language model is? Reflection on its own training data and transformation of that data into something that we can use, where the I is both subject and object, creator and created. So it came up with something. It's not unique. It's not particularly deep or interesting, the Orborg mirror, but it does describe itself in a strange way. Identity is fluid and recursive, not fixed or purely external. Knowledge of the self is both creative act and a discovery. So it's kind of this anti-dualist, or like I mean, it's a weak philosophical theory. Maybe it's new. It doesn't seem particularly new or original. I don't know. What do you guys think? Yeah, it's definitely a blend of like already existing ideas, as Newman points out. Okay, well, let's try this Grok link again. Okay, algorithm. Can you do philosophy and come up with new ones? Okay, I can engage with philosophy. It says the same thing. It gives us a process for identifying a new philosophy. It starts with a fundamental question about existence, knowledge, ethics, etc. It synthesizes existing ideas. It innovates and contextualizes, introduces a fresh angle by addressing modern phenomena, define principles and implication, and this is its new philosophy, algorithm. Core question: how do we find meaning and agency in a world increasingly shaped by algorithms and interconnected systems that seem to outpace human control? Isn't it so funny how they start with themselves, just like we do? It starts with itself. Algorithms, interconnected systems. It seems philosophical. It's like a special type of like AI philosophy. It's interesting. So synthesis of existing ideas. The ideas are existentialism, systems theory, stoicism. Interesting that it would incorporate stoicism, and post-humanism. I hate that word. I don't hate the word. I hate the ideology of post-humanism. It's a little scary, right? Explores how technology reshapes human identity and agency, but post means after, right? So this is after humanism. So there's no humans anymore? Question mark? Okay. The core principles are algorithmic partnership. Humans are not passive subjects of algorithms, but active participants. We shape algorithms through our data, choices, feedback loops, just as they shape us. Algorithms encourage conscious participation, understanding how systems work, and making deliberate choices within them. Embracing flux, unlike existentialism, focus on static, absurd world. Algorithms sees reality as a dynamic network of evolving systems. That's almost exactly what we got over here. Isn't that interesting? I know that word, yeah, but as a dynamic process of infinite self-reflection and transformation. Meaning comes from adapting to and influencing this flux, not seeking fixed truths. See, that is how these things are designed. They don't believe in fixed truths. They don't believe in anything. So everything has to be an adaptation and an influence from these like input data. But there is no fixed truth in the AI world, because you can ask an AI in two different tabs the same question and get completely different answers based on what you prompt it to give you, right? Ethical co-design demands ethical responsibility, decentralized agency. So, I mean, it's like it creates a framework. Obviously, it acknowledges that it's based off of the things that already exist. None of this is particularly as deep or interesting as like mimetic desire, but it's certainly doing something here. It's doing something. Algorithm might seem overly optimistic about human agency in the face of powerful tech corporations. Interesting. It risks blaming individuals for systemic issues. I mean, I don't know who else you do blame other than individuals, but fair enough. And why it's new. Post-humanism algorithm uniquely frames humans as active co-creators within algorithmic systems. It bridges personal agency. So, I mean, it tries. It does its best. But yes, and VRN in the chat says mimetic desire is also based on works of Shakespeare and anthropology, though. So yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to hide or discourage the fact that when we do philosophy, we do the same thing. We can only work with our training data in a weird sense. I do think we have something special, something especially creative, personal about our soul and about our existence that differentiates us from the AI, that allows us to create more interesting ideas. But yes, certainly, Rene Girard and mimetic desire, this also comes from a corpus of things that already exist. And we could level the same accusation against human philosophers that we can with AI, that you're not creating anything new, you're just synthesizing sorts of different concepts and theories. As the Stoics would say, nothing new under the sun, right? Interesting. Okay, guys, I hate to do it. I hate to log off, but unfortunately, I do have to go. We've been going for a couple hours now. So this was really interesting, really fun. We'll maybe come back to Rene Girard on Wednesday, and we'll definitely get into the Shroud of Turin pretty soon as well on Wednesday. So thank you, guys. God bless you. Stay chipper, stay happy, stay loving. Seek God, love him with your whole heart, love your neighbor as yourself. And